Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? I just thought I'd rattle the microphone a little bit right in your ear. Okay, that's enough of that. As I move things into position. Yeah, another Friday morning. We're back on the air. It is Friday, January 12th, 2018, and things are going as they usually do on Fridays. People want out of town, and they want fast ways out of town. Donald Trump, I'm sure, can't wait to get out of town. He's having a hell of a day today. I noticed this magic mouse thing I got here for the Mac that runs the show is really super annoying. They came up with this fantastic new buttonless design that I guess sort of senses pressure on the surface rather than actually having me press any buttons. And I guess you can't click on it. Maybe you can. But every time I go to turn down the music and turn the music back up on another track to switch gears here on the show, it interprets my lifting my finger off as somehow clicking things and turning the volume back up. I can't get the volume to just adjust the way it ought to. It was so much easier with the touchpad. Too bad. Well, actually, I guess I could go out and get a touchpad for this Mac. Anyway, not enough about this. These are the things that happen in these. Can I even say what the president said yesterday? I know this is a new topic of discussion in the newsrooms around, well, I guess around the country. Around the world, I'm sure that they don't mind so much. I guess they're not so weird and nervous about saying things like we say or what we prohibit on the air. But you all know the word I'm talking about, of course, the president referring to, well, basically every other country in the world, except Norway, apparently, where immigrants might come to the United States, from which immigrants might come to the United States as S-word holes. Can we even, I don't know how you can put it together. All the news guys, they have lawyers. They can figure out whether or not they can say S-hole or not. That sounds an awful lot like another word that you're not even supposed to be able to say, A-hole. But anyway, you know the word. I don't know how we stand. I guess we're not broadcasting on any terrestrial radio stations at the moment, at least not that I'm aware of. It's always possible that the show could be being stolen without my knowledge because we don't have anybody monitoring our rights in this way. This is not an open invitation, of course, to steal the show, although really it is, because every time we've had the show played on a terrestrial radio station, they were just basically taking it anyway. They just had permission. That's nice. Not that they were offering any dollars for it, mind you, but that's the way it goes in the podcast game. I suppose we were lucky to be on the air at all. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't accept that kind of argument. Like writing for free. It's good for the exposure. You know how things go. Anyway, that all being said, many people are saying that the president is not fit for office. We'll find out today. He has his physical today. I don't know whether to wish him well, wish him ill. Is that really, a humanitarian thing to do? I'm so annoyed with the guy, and he's such a scumbag, and he bothers everybody so much. You want to, I don't know. Is it fair to wish people ill on their physicals? I mean, even just, like winking things at you, like, I hope the doctor loses his watch. You don't want to, but that's not funny either. And it doesn't work that way either. And I don't know. We'll see what kind of results we get out of this thing. I'm sure many people will be saying that it's the greatest physical ever performed in the history of medicine. And I don't know. So he's off anger tweeting again this morning, having, I guess, the story, the real actual news story of his comments was what he had having a White House meeting, an Oval Office meeting regarding immigration, and I guess they were presenting the plans to him about what they were going to do going forward in Congress after having the very presidential meeting the other day in which he pointed at a lot of people and appeared to be listening to them while they explained what was going on, and he nodded in agreement, and a couple of times he opened his mouth and made sure everybody knew that he had no idea things of what his policy was, what a clean bill was, what that meant. And he had to get corrected and change his mind. Yesterday, of course, he had to change directions on the FISA bill, so this is becoming an increasing problem So yesterday, I guess, in going over the details of the immigration bill, he was perturbed to find out that the plans still involved allowing people to come into this country from other countries, even though they might be brown, or lots of brown people might live in those countries, which of course are the crap countries, and you can't allow them in. And of course he had to say that, why don't we have more people from places like Norway? And I guess that was on his mind because he had just been on stage, as we mentioned yesterday, with the Norwegian Prime Minister. She's white, right? So, why don't we get more people from the white countries? And in case you had any doubt, or you're one of those people that think it's really funny or clever in some way to insinuate that maybe he meant something else, or maybe those countries really are in bad shape and that's all he meant and he's just telling it the way it is, or he just wants merit-based immigration, which he keeps saying we want people with certain skills to come to the country. And, that's an argument that could be made, but it's, of course, thinly veiled in terms of hiding the racism behind it. But he didn't even do that work. I did see somebody point it out rather more articulately than I've been doing it this morning. And if I can scroll back through my Twitter feed and find it, I'll share it with you. Yes, here we are. Nick Miroff, probably Miroff. He's the national security reporter at the Washington Post, covering border security, etc., and including the Department of Homeland Security. And so he's going to have a perspective on this that counts, as we all do. The significance is bigger, he says, than the word that we're concerned with today, the whole word. The president's supporters are pushing hard for a merit-based immigration model, supposedly. That's the closed and quote, merit-based immigration model. But Trump today didn't say that he wants more doctors or engineers or scientists. He said he wants Norway. And Norway is not a skill. And that's a very key point. Lots of nuance. People are parsing the statement and not trying to defend it even. There's plenty of critics parsing it, and this is why it's bad, and that's why it's bad because this jackass says words like this, and it gets out. And he says it, of course, about other countries, some of whom we have considerable and important dealings with. Others, not so much, but who the hell wants to have to face their diplomats the Haitian ambassadors being summoned today to explain the president's comments. And what are you going to say? What's the explanation? Our president is an idiot, racist, bigot, and this is how he thinks. He's revealing himself to you. I don't know what to say. I can't defend this, but I'm sure they'll try and come up with something. But I don't know. It might be that everybody just rolls their eyes. S-hole countries, by the way, tend to have, I guess what the president would call asshole countries, obviously, tend to have, at this point in the administration, career diplomats, and usually career diplomats covering those countries in the embassies and consulates. So it's entirely likely that anybody that the governments of these countries should summon to the offices of their foreign ministers or their presidents or prime ministers, whatever they've got, looking for apologies, explanations, that they'll get that, or at the very minimum, they'll get a knowing eye roll from somebody who's been in high-ranking positions in the State Department for years and can't believe that they continue to serve our country under such an idiotic president. But a few, of course, will be diplomatic, or rather appointees of this president, of President Trump. But, those plum positions that he would reward friends with tend to go to places that he would probably be less inclined to think of as S-hole countries. They're top-notch, great, really, truly terrific countries where people when they come to this country, they spend money on golf or great hotels like the various Trump properties all across America and around the world, really. So, this is essentially what makes the difference between an S-hole place and not an S-hole is, can I get a Trump hotel built there? Is there an oligarchy? Are there rich people who come from that country? Are they white? That's essentially all he's really interested in, as Nick Maroff points out. Coming from Norway isn't anything special. Some dispute, I guess, this morning about whether or not he said Haitians should be taken out or not allowed into the country, take them out of the bill. He denies that part. He doesn't deny the rest of it. The White House, of course, is, are we still working with anonymous staffers who wouldn't go on record and give their name for it, but they're hinting at what is probably likely true. They, inside the White House, believe that this is a net positive for the president with his base. This is just another entry in the LOL, YOLO, nothing matters ledger, as I said in the Morning Post. And it's largely true. His base really does believe in that. And his base really does think that this sort of thing is, as somebody put it this morning, really just a bunch of unpleasant truths, that yet his bigotry isn't offered up with malice. It's just true, and everybody thinks so. And to a certain extent, I assume that that's true, at least among his base. But as others have pointed out the rest of the morning today, this is a good reminder. Remember when it was such a horrible thing? Oh my God, how rude Hillary Clinton is to say that half of his base are deplorables and deplorable people. And, if half of his base, or more than half of his base, a considerable majority of his base, really does find remarks like that made from the Oval Office, for crying out loud, really just anywhere, but made from the Oval Office, if that's admirable, if that's just the truth that others are afraid to speak, afraid to give voice to, and he's so wonderful because he's courageous enough to say it out loud, that's deplorable. And another moment, I don't know how much stock to put in it, another moment in which the mainstream traditional media types are gasping and grasping at pearls, clutching at their pearls and saying, oh my God, he's a racist. Jim Acosta, I guess, actually finally came out and said it on the air, on CNN's air. But as others have pointed out, I guess here it is. Look, I found this one. Dennis Mercero tweeting. Oh, look at this. He says he is. I've talked storms covering like weather and climate stuff for Gawker, Mental Floss, Popular Science, Forbes, Capital Weather. How do you like that? Dennis Mercero put it this way. Take note of all the reporters outraged over Trump's racist remarks today, because in 3 weeks, they're all going to trip over themselves to fawn about how presidential he was while reading the State of the Union. And I think that's, I know that's true. I don't have to tell you. You know it's true too. Anyway, let's see. We can round up some other things. We can get right to the news. We can gather up the various comments floating in this morning. Oh, yes. Have I tweeted out yet? I haven't. It's already 14 minutes old. The Daily Kos Radio is live today. Tweet from Bill in Portland. Man, I better find out what I'm going to do with the show. It's live. I don't need to tell you that at this point. Kagro X, hi. That's me. You can reach me, by the way, during the show, if you're listening live, at KagroX on Twitter. Do try and sneak in the KITM, Kagro in the Morning hashtag, so that it stays up a long time on my Twitter feed and I can share it with others. What are we going to do today? I've got the latest coming out of America's real, oh gosh, you even gave me the word, crap hole, or as it's now known, the really, really White House. All right, yeah, I mean, and I had a good time yesterday, by the way, tweeting out pictures of the president's puckered lips. You know how he purses his, that's key to any, if you're trying to work on an imitation of the president. You got to throw that in there every once in a while, and that helps give you his weird inflection. But those pursed lips that he constantly is getting captured photographs with, and he gave himself the perfect caption for it. That's the S-hole we all have to be really worried about. Nothing comes out of that, but, well, you know what. All right. Let's see. What else are we rounding up here today? Michael Musson says he actually wants people from Norway, not Norway, but Norway. And let's see. Also, according to Trump, DACA has nothing to do with Dreamers. Yes, that was another famous comment in the immigration, the very presidential immigration meeting from the other day. He was correcting Democrats who were speaking, who were using the term Dreamers rather than referring to the legislation about which created the terminology of Dreamers. I know that you people are confusing everything. You're saying Dreamers when you should be talking about DACA. Okay, let's use the correct terminology, DACA. Stop talking about Dreamers, because he knows the subject so well. Yeah, well, all right. And another comment from Michael who says, Trump doesn't do thinly veiled comments. He does thinly hooded comments. And that gets right to it. Let's see. What else is Jingy ringing in today? What have I done here? Let's see. Just in, I believe I just heard a lawyer type tell everyone to steal this show. Oh, yeah, right. I did do that. Not so much in reference to an Abby Hoffman 60s page turner, more thumbing his nose at non-existent regulators, leaving him limitless to achieve and inspire. That's very nice. That's very uplifting. It's really about getting no pay for doing the show. Does that count? Is that really a higher calling? Is there anything inspirational about that? It doesn't pay for anything, I can tell you that. Let's see. What else? Oh, here's a good point from Brian Beutler, pointing out today, as he's saying about Ben Shapiro, despite serious daddy issues, this former Bannon flunky learned well, intentionally misdefine the scandal, brush off with whataboutism, lie, deflect, repeat. What's he talking about? His appearance on television. Whose air are we talking about here? Fox News, I guess. Showing Ben Shapiro on screen and quoting him saying that the president's cursing about the situation. Is cursing. Is it something that we love? No. But he said it behind closed doors, unlike Joe Biden, who, of course, A, wasn't the president, and B, yes, didn't do it behind closed doors. But, yeah, I like the conflation of the issues. One, of course, cursed in saying that it was a big effing deal that they were actually, doing something positive for people and helping people out. An affirmative program for people in trouble in the United States who needed a leg up and were going to get it, as opposed to Donald Trump's cursing, which, though behind closed doors, happened in the Oval Office. Remember, it was a horrible thing that, oh my God, Obama wore jeans on a Saturday in the Oval Office. He sat on the Resolute desk. When do we start calling it the Resolute desk? I think that's, I don't know. Is that not a modern creation? I don't know where that came from, but I guess it first came to my attention. I thought it was a joke, like the way George W. Bush used to say. He's described himself that way. I'm resolute. I'm resoluting today. He would not understand how to use that part of speech, and that I thought they were kidding. Like, that's the Resolute desk. This is where I go to get resolute. And it's just, but apparently it's older than that. But, he wore a tan suit. He's demeaning the office. Do you remember when they were doing this? I mean, I know there's no point in trying to even convince anybody anymore of the double standard. Everybody who needs to be convinced is convinced. Anybody who is not going to believe it is just deplorable, and you should be writing them off at this point. But I know every once in a while it's astonishing to see. I guess the problem was how much mainstream media coverage, and I'm supposed to hate that term and use traditional media instead, but how much media coverage they actually gave to, even if they rolled their eyes at it, how much they gave to, oh my God, Obama is said by some to be demeaning the office because, I don't know what, orange juice instead of coffee, arugula, the wrong kind of mustard to be put on a hamburger, even though he wasn't in the office. Inside the office, oh my goodness, he's got jeans on. He's wearing he's got his coat off. His sleeves are rolled up. He's wearing a tan suit. Versus all other countries are assholes. F them. I hate their guts. In the Oval Office. It was behind closed doors. It was in the Oval Office. Ben Shapiro said, well, at least it wasn't. And finally, the reminder. Yes, Joe Biden, not president, says, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed with emotion at how much we're doing to help people here in the United States with an affirmative actual policy versus, I don't like people. They're gross, especially if they're brown or poor or both. Curse, curse, curse. They're not the same sort of thing. Okay? So, yeah, there's your conflation for you. But no, and that flies on television as a real defense. Well, at least he's not Joe Biden, who, lost control of his mouth in his excitement over something positive. Versus going out of his way to demean and put people down. Anyway, I don't even know how much longer we can go on with this. I see that the Daily News and the New York tabloids having fun with it, using the reinventing the poop emoji with Donald Trump hair on. That's their headline today. S word there. Asterisk T for brains. Which is obviously something we've all thought for a long time about Donald Trump. They're just telling it like it is, man. They're not afraid. Let's see. Monica says that the Dreamers versus DACA comments are worse than I think. I don't know about that. We don't really know what I think. This program has nothing to do with what I think. This is all without thinking. But you're right. Almost certainly the actual transcript is much, much worse. Let's see. The Dreamers versus DACA comments are worse than I think. Read the Wall Street Journal transcript. It's ridiculous. He has no clue whatsoever. Maybe that's not a bad way of spending the day, reading some transcripts. Can I get the Wall Street Journal transcript? Do I need to? They didn't firewall it, did they? I did. I don't usually flip through the Wall Street Journal. I think I put in Pocket a Vox explainer on it. I assume everything that's being published at Vox is an explainer. Maybe this one's not. Dylan Matthews had written a story that ran under the headline of Trump's Wall Street Journal interview is incoherent and bizarre. So Dylan agrees with you there, Monica. And it was, of course, ridiculous. I don't know how much of it is reprinted here. They usually don't do that. Maybe they have a link to the Wall Street Journal. Yes, they do. We'll find out whether it's paywalled or not. Probably best if it is, because otherwise I'll just read it in his voice for 2 hours and we'll all have a good laugh. But I was going to say, where will that leave you for the weekend? But where does this ever leave you for the weekend? Really? I don't know. I downplay the importance of this show. I should be talking it up. Somebody else give me that line. I can't do it. Friday. It's very depressing. Let's see. Grabbed and put up as a subheader for this piece over in Vox, which again I assume is an explainer, is one of the more incoherent and bizarre quotes that Dylan pulled out of the transcript. I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, he says, and we all wonder what he means by probably. That's a good question. He doesn't mean anything. He's an idiot. It's just the only name of a foreign leader that he remembered, so he went ahead and said it. Let's see. Among the things he said, we might as well skip the explanation. You don't need to explain Donald Trump's idiocy to me, Vox. Among the other things he said, I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. I have relationships with people. Thank you for telling us. That's very nice. I've heard about some of your relationships, by the way. You think when you're a star, they let you have those relationships, but they don't. I think you people are surprised. We'll see. Wall Street Journal reporters asked him if that meant he talks directly to Kim, which would be a major departure from U.S. policy over the past decade. Thanks for the explainer. Trump replied, I don't want to comment on it. I'm not saying I have or haven't. I just don't want to comment, which means no, he doesn't talk to him. But he wants you to think he's got superpowers and does things that other presidents don't. On the border wall, he explained Mexico can pay for it indirectly through NAFTA. Now he's got to explain this. we make a good deal on NAFTA and say, I'm going to take a small percentage of that money, and it's going toward the wall. Guess what? Mexico's paying. What money? How do you take it? I don't know. I made a good deal. That means there's money. That's what a good deal means. At least that's the way I think about it. If there's no money changing hands, what's the difference? How can it be a good deal if we don't make money on it? Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Other things here. Should we just read the transcript, or do we trust them? Does Dylan Matthews really know what he's talking about when he gets the highlights? Let's see. What does he pull out the DACA thing? Where did I read that? I don't even know. But he doesn't pull that out and put it in the bullet points at the top. So maybe we'll click through to the Wall Street Journal interview and take a look at how long that thing is if it's not behind a paywall. Our break is coming up, of course. I'm just going to walk around the house and read the transcript aloud in Donald Trump's voice during the break. You can imagine that happening. I could record that and send it out as a bonus episode for which I charge $10, and then maybe we can bring some money that way. I find that very un-Daily Coast-like, though. I have given that some thought, and people do that. And it's smart, and it's a good business model, and it's fair, and people actually like it, and they were willing to cough up a buck or two for an extra bonus episode. I feel bound by the ethos of Daily Coast, this being Daily Coast Radio, not to do that sort of thing. I don't know. Perhaps we'll give it some thought in the future. All right. Oh, some of my buttons have moved, but there's the one I need. Letting us know that our break is coming up. Let's see, 30 seconds before we go out. Oh, the Wall Street Journal story isn't firewalled. So, yes, it is. Ha! Spoke too soon. All right, well, maybe we can pull that thing out for the weekend. I know Greg subscribes to the Wall Street Journal. Maybe I could borrow his subscription off him and read through it and find out the really juicy stuff. I bet I can Google up the DACA versus Dreamer bit. Or maybe Monica, you want to help me out with that? Send it to me over the break. We'll be right back and see if she's responsive. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's just too much to get to today. I don't even know which direction to go. I should probably turn Twitter off just because there's too many news stories flying by. But people are bringing up too many good comments. I could just look at our comments section here, essentially, and read through all of those. Monica, by the way, had already sent me the quote before I even tasked her with that. That's how good this audience is. You know, you can hear me fumbling about, looking, and look, you're very anxious to help, and I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Even got some feedback on the Resolute desk to share with you. There's a lot to share with you. Sometimes I find it in time, sometimes not. But so many interesting comments from outside the sphere even of our listenership. Just new stories being generated, new comments being, I guess comments like calling other countries assholes from the Oval Office is going to generate this sort of outpouring. Some will argue that we've been getting distracted by it. I don't know. There's certainly no plan to have distracted us from it. There's no plan for anything ever from this guy, so I'm not too worried about that. But, well, let's see. What other things can we share with everybody? First of all, let's see. Monica sent me the quote we were looking for, and I think I had already seen this. In fact, she sent me Anna Marie Cox commenting on a screenshot of part of the transcript. And here, in fact, she says that Anna Marie has got a bunch of screenshots out there of key parts. I was reading those since I don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal either. I'm with you. That's how I saw it. And I'm pretty sure I did see Anna Marie Cox's tweet about this. And that's where I read about the DACA Dreamer things. Yes. Because I recall her comment on it being, and this is just pancake jump rope wolfhound nonsense. In other words, word salad. The portion she has captured here is Mr. Trump, as he's referred to in the transcript, saying, that's comprehensive. Well, if we could do that, that's fine. I don't know that that's going to be possible. It's talking about the immigration bill. If we do we got to do comprehensive. Which, again, a misuse of the word and understanding the part of speech that it represents, etc. We should do bipartisan. I want to do comprehensive. These are words that he hears being bandied about with regard to legislation. I want to do comprehensive bipartisan in a comprehensive bipartisan way. That would actually be proper usage, though. That's comprehensive. Well, if we could do that, that's fine. I don't know that that's going to be possible. There's a big difference. First of all, there's a big difference. By the way, this is the first couple words of the sentence are just repeat over and over. This is the straight transcript. There's a big difference. First of all, there's a big difference. But okay, he's stammering. There's a big difference between DACA and Dreamers, okay? And then there's that, right, I love the okay. That's like his unconscious tell that he doesn't know what he's talking about. But the okay, he understands, is interpreted by those listening to him who generally are poorer than him. And it's his belief that people who are poorer than him will listen to him because he's rich, and he's right because he's rich. Being rich is what proves rightness in his mind. So he puts that in the okay. That's like this arrogant, condescending okay. Like, okay, can you understand me? Are you able to follow me with your poor brain? And that's a declaration that he's right, but it's also something that I think he leans on when he knows I might not know what I'm talking about. There's a big difference. First of all, there's a big difference between DACA and Dreamers, okay? Dreamers are different. And I want American kids to be dreamers also, by the way, which of course is to misunderstand what we are talking about by dreamers. I love it. Dreamers and DACA are different. First of all, they're spelled differently. Two completely different words. DACA, Dreamers. And dreamers, I have dreams, right? I go to sleep every day. I dream, oh, my hair, I wish it was normal. I wish I wasn't 5,000 pounds overweight. Whatever it is that he dreams about. And I wish I was smart. I wish I understood my job. I wish I hadn't been president. I have dreams. So he thinks the American dream, well, who better to dream American dreams than Americans, for God's sake? I want Americans to be dreamers also. They're not dreamers because they're already Americans. That means American citizenship. The dream here is American citizenship. But no. Anyway, dreamers are different. And I want American kids to be dreamers also, by the way. I want American kids to be dreamers also. Again, verbatim. There's a lot of. There's a big difference. I want American kids to be dreamers. I want American kids to be dreamers. Also. He actually says also twice. There you go. He's Donnie 2 times here today. There's a lot of. First of all, there's a big difference between DACA and Dreamers. Okay, I want American kids to be dreamers also. Seriously, it actually says that. But there's a big difference, he now repeats, between DACA and Dreamers. A lot of times when I was with certain Democrats, they kept using the word dreamer. I said, please use the word DACA. It's a totally different word. And, of course, the Wall Street Journal interviewer says, sure. To which, of course, the correct answer is, no, it isn't. Not, sure, you're lying. I mean, that could have been fine, right? But I don't know. For some reason, he wants to deal with it that way. DACA, Dreamers, totally different thing, okay? No, totally the same thing. You are on the wrong page again, but no one can convince you of that, so I guess we stop trying. I don't know. I found that extraordinarily annoying, and I don't know. Did I not get that right? Maybe it was the repetition that we were lacking in recalling this for people. But you're absolutely right, and Anna Marie Cox is a good place to turn if you also don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal but want to see the key parts of that interview and transcript. And again, I love the transcripts of his interviews. It lays it bare just what an idiot he really is. Let's see. Other comments from the morning that I can unravel for you here. Let's see. Have you seen noted humanitarian Steve King's tweet on the S-hole S storm? Asks Sidra this morning. Let's see. What have we got here? Steve King tweeting, "Hang in there, Mr. President." And then adds, "Real Donald Trump. If those countries aren't as you described, Democrats should be happy to deport criminal aliens back to them and end anchor babies too." Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there. So, right. Of course, we all know that one of the dodges being employed today is, well, of course those countries are S-holes. That's why people want to leave them and come to the United States. We all come from S-hole countries. If we're happy with the situation in the country we're living in, then we don't emigrate. And that's to some extent true, but of course fails to sort of capture what's going on in the comment, which is that entire countries are being dismissed. I mean, every country has its positives and negatives, yes. But basically, of course, Donald Trump probably thinks of things this way. Any place that I don't have a hotel or want a hotel because I think there's enough rich people is an S-hole. And that's just, I don't know. I mean, in addition to being racist and stupid and closed-minded and xenophobic, it's just so, I mean, it's just such a small-minded thing to say and just so high. What do you want me to tell you about this? You know about this. It's inappropriate for the President of the United States to say anything like that. You can't do it. The end. Other comments coming in that need sharing. Dave Gilligan says he's got too much time on his hands this morning, and so he tells us about the Resolute desk. And this finally makes some sense of the terminology for me. The Resolute desk, like people who sit at it are resolute. I feel like being resolute when I sit at this very impressive desk. That doesn't really, I mean, the resolution desk doesn't really work either. Why do they call it that? I'm so resolute at this desk. Is that what's happening? No, that's not what's happening. WhiteHouseHistory.org knows what's happening, and Dave knows too, and knew where to turn to let me know that he already knew this, I think, on Twitter, unless he actually went and researched it, in which case, thanks. That was very helpful. This is it. Here's the desk, a picture of it at the WhiteHouseHistory.org page. And it says, "This double pedestal partner's desk." That's what it actually is. It's not a Resolute desk. It's a partner's desk. What does that mean? I don't know. Double pedestal partner's desk, which I think is that like the kind of desk, is a double pedestal desk, one that has like the two sides holding it up. And I guess it probably has drawers in each one. But the pedestals, I guess, are the on which the desk stands, as opposed to a single pedestal like lectern, which wouldn't be used as a desk. Anyway, I don't know. This double pedestal partner's desk, that part I don't know about. Usually called the Resolute desk. And by the way, it's the capitalized Resolute, but not capitalized desk. So it's not the title of the desk. This is very interesting. It was made from, this is how come it's called. It's made from the oak timbers of the British ship HMS Resolute as a gift to President Rutherford B. Hayes from Queen Victoria in 1880. Mystery solved. It's a desk made out of the HMS Resolute. Now, I don't know whether the HMS Resolute had any particular significance for the United States or not. Or whether the HMS Resolute is like sailing around at this point there's a giant hole in the ship. What happened? Well, we made a desk, a double pedestal partner's desk, no less, out of the, what? I don't know. You know your tall ship terminology? All I have is the poop deck. And I assume that's the deck they took that off of, because they knew that Donald Trump would one day get it. Rutherford B. Hayes, Always a good target for gift giving. Queen Victoria gave that one to him. Did the Resolute like shell Fort McHenry or something back in the War of 1812? Why the Resolute? I don't know. That's the next thing to research. Rutherford B. Hayes. Well, Queen Victoria didn't get a chance to pick and choose who she thought should be president at that point. The British weren't meddling in our elections at that date. So, I don't know. Rutherford B. Hayes brings to mind, more than anything, the image of the kind of guy who would have had his engraving on the Smith Brothers cough drop boxes more than anything else. Probably dating myself with that, but... well, that's all Rutherford B. Hayes brings to mind for me. But I guess now he'll be forever linked in my mind with the Resolute desk, being so resolute at it. I don't know. I think that's a very interesting pull from history. Thanks so much for sharing that with me. Let's see. Other things that we need to catch up on. Let's see. Anything else coming in here? Here, Canadian pundit weighing in. If MSNBC can say asshole on national television, so can you. Yeah, I could. I'm just not on national television. I could probably lean on that. I guess what I'm thinking about here is, what if I reuse this broadcast someday as a rerun and we're back on the radio, and then that sends them into a panic? I'm planning ahead for something that's never going to happen, but fair game. Anyway, I think it's a good practice to be conscious of these things. Because of the many, many children who download the show. Probably not really happening. All right. Time to wander back over into Pocket, plus the other things that I have left open that flew by this morning. Let's see. I have this tweet here from Max Kennerly, who is retweeting James Hohmann. Between them, they have an excellent comment here. Max noting that he's been in office almost a year, that would be Donald Trump, and he hasn't even done the stuff typically done during a transition. And that is true. Hohmann, the one noting that there are no Trump nominees for 245 of 626 key executive branch jobs, including deputy secretaries at Treasury and Commerce, Census Director, Director of ATF, Director of the Office on Violence Against Women, Commissioner on Social Security Administration, of the Social Security Administration, etc. According to the Washington Post, I assume that it's true. I don't even need to click through to the Washington Post to know that it's true. Yeah, here they might be actually, playing according to a game plan. The fewer people they have to put through Senate confirmation, the better. And the fewer people there are in decision-making capacities throughout the executive branch, the more they need to depend on direction from the White House. It's their only hope of being anything close to having centralized control of what they're doing, given that the president could contradict policy at the drop of a hat. This morning we found out that, of course, we knew that this was the case, but this morning we're having factual reporting on the mechanics of how the House reached out to the president to let him know, oops, you're contradicting your position on the FISA bill. Let's see if we can't get a corrective tweet out there so we can settle this issue. As it turns out, the president, who totally doesn't watch television because he hasn't got time for it, was, of course, using his executive time to live tweet Fox and Friends. It was Anthony Napolitano, I think, who was on the air at the time questioning the wisdom of this FISA bill. So the president panics because he said, basically, the president should panic because it doesn't make any sense. I'm confused as to why the president would back such a thing. So the president said, hey, that must mean I'm confused about why I would back such a thing, and tweets out, I'm confused about why I back such a thing. It causes an uproar, of course, inside of Congress. The Washington Post covering this one, Philip Rucker, Ashley Parker, Josh Dawsey on this one. Trump's ping pong on surveillance law sets off a 101-minute scramble. And I like the fact that it was 101 minutes, 101, because this is FISA 101, essentially. This should have been, common background knowledge for a guy who's president of the United States. But this S. Can I use all words that include the S word in it are now legal on the air? Has no idea what the hell's going on. Anything, ever, about anything. And ping-ponging is, it might as well just be herpaderp. Trump's herpaderp on surveillance law sets off a 101-minute scramble. The guy who doesn't watch television is live tweeting his favorite television show. And the guy, the Speaker of the House, who says, I never read Twitter, and I never read tweets from Trump. I don't know what Trump tweets. I don't waste my time with it. Instead, spends an hour and a half trying to get the president back on the Republican page on FISA. So here's the mechanics of what went on. 6:46 Thursday morning, Andrew Napolitano, a Fox News Channel personality and supporter of President Trump, in case you didn't know, and there's a lot who don't, opined about a critical government surveillance program on Fox and Friends, the show that is part alarm clock, part unofficial briefing for the commander-in-chief. Funny. I'm scratching my head, Napolitano said, referring to Thursday's House vote to reauthorize a key part of the FISA Act. I don't understand why Donald Trump is in favor of this. No one does. Not even Donald Trump, unfortunately. So we have a problem. And then just 47 minutes later, because the president doesn't really get up early and get his briefing, he TiVos it and watches it later, Trump was no longer in favor of the bill that his own White House had been championing. What a champion he is, hey? In a tweet, the president quoted verbatim the Fox headline from Napolitano's appearance. He's able to do that, amazingly enough, and suggested that the FISA law had been used by the Obama administration to, quote, there's just no other way to do this except to quote directly, so badly surveil and abuse the Trump campaign. The presidential decree, a mere 40 words, with a mere 40 IQ, I added that. Don't blame the Washington Post for that. Set off a mad scramble across Washington. House Speaker Paul D. Ryan, R. Wisconsin, like we don't know who he is, spent 30 minutes on the phone with the president, explaining the differences between domestic and foreign surveillance. Now, I don't know how far into it he got, but I imagine a good portion of the 30 minutes was there's two kinds of surveillance, domestic and foreign. Domestic takes place domestically. What do you mean by that? That means inside the United States. All right. So not Puerto Rico. Well, yes, Puerto Rico. Okay. I'm confused. And then foreign surveillance happens outside the United States. Okay. So Puerto Rico. No. What's wrong with you? All right. So he's explaining the differences. Really, of course, you could spend much more than half an hour explaining the differences between the two, not because foreign means elsewhere and domestic means inside the United States. That's probably how he spent his half hour. But yeah, there's different rules governing how surveillance can happen and what you need to get in terms of permission from judges to do surveillance domestically versus foreign, etc. And then, of course, there's foreign persons inside the United States being surveilled as well. That's different, too. And this must have been enormously confusing to somebody like the president. So, Speaker Ryan spends 30 minutes on the phone explaining the differences, as many fellow Republicans reacted in disbelief and befuddlement. Why? I don't know. White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly, because he's different from the rest of the John Kellys, also directly intervened with Trump, reiterating the program's importance before traveling to the Capitol, where he parried questions from confused lawmakers. A presidential correction came 101 minutes after the initial tweet. The second missive, an explanation perhaps as much for Trump himself as for anybody else, stated that today's vote is about foreign surveillance of foreign bad guys on foreign land, which it isn't. It is in part, but also it's about foreign surveillance of foreign bad guys on domestic land as well, but okay. Or they're not even on domestic land, but the conversation passes through domestically controlled servers. Okay. You get the idea. He concludes finally, we need it. Trump concluded in his second Twitter message, get smart. It's a good idea. You should. The confusion, less than 2 hours in all, sent members of Congress reeling, the president's staff scrambling, and was a fresh reminder of how Trump's haphazard impulses can undermine his own administration and upend the daily workings of the federal government. The president's ping-pong on attitudes towards FISA renewal suggests to me that he doesn't fully understand the issue, which is complicated even for experts to understand, said John E. McLaughlin, former head of the CIA. For the intelligence community, it is yet another signal that the president is not fully attuned to how they operate and how carefully they stay within the law. Trump's misunderstanding of the nuances of surveillance laws came as he and his aides have been struggling to silence the national debate over the president's mental fitness in the wake of allegations in a new book about the chaotic White House. So, I don't know. That's probably all we really need to mine from this particular article, but there's some funny bits in here. For instance, that's called cleanup on aisle 6, quipped one Republican strategist in frequent touch with the White House, speaking anonymously, of course, so that he can stay in frequent touch with the White House, and other fun things like that. Well, basically, the guy doesn't know what's going on in his world, and that's really troubling because he's supposed to be the leader of it. Anyway, let's see. What other fun things might we include? Why did I mark this? Okay. I guess I grabbed... I must have tried to grab a story from this morning's Daily Kos, and I don't know which one anymore. But, of course, basically the whole morning is going to be consumed with how ridiculously stupid and racist Donald Trump really was. And Barb was after me last night. Unfortunately, I'll explain myself to you here, Barb. You're not listening. But anyway, maybe, Jen, you can tell her what I was doing. It was my son's basketball practice while she was tweeting and emailing me. Do you have the credits for who took those pictures you were using of Trump's pursed lips and tweeting out the S-hole word all night last night? And I didn't get the message until it was too late. But some of them are out there for licensing through the various stock imagery houses. But yeah, she's figured out some other things. But you should see the headlines at Daily Kos today are all you need to know. Laura Clausen writing, Democratic Senator, reports are true. Trump said hate-filled, vile, and racist things. It was Dick Durbin, I guess, who brought us the news of exactly what the president was saying there in the Oval Office. Next story by Mark Sumner, illustrated by a close-up photo of leathery-skinned Donald Trump in his ridiculous, nonsense headdress. Donald Trump's interview with the Wall Street Journal is absolutely, thoroughly, unbelievably nuts. Ooh, let's see what we could take a look, or I'll say I recommend taking a look at what Mark grabbed. I trust Mark's highlighting more than Dylan's, I guess, a little bit, but that's just tribal preference, perhaps. But Mark knows what he's doing. The other headline from Mark this morning: President S. head denies racist S-hole remark. How can I not say this if it's on the front? Well, Daily Kos can get away with a lot more in print. Anyway, so he denies it. That's stupid because, of course, he spent yesterday insisting that he meant it. Let's see. Daily Kos Elections headlining with Missouri governor and his insane sex blackmail scheme. That doesn't seem like a particularly good idea, but good to cover anyway. But yeah, last night it was like Hunter Palooza last night. Nobody could have covered it better, the lunacy of it all, than Hunter. So, all right. You're no doubt up to date on what's been printed over at Daily Kos. I probably, while I should spend more time reading the writing of my friends and colleagues over there, it's likely that you've already seen some of these things. Other things that have been shared with us that we might squeeze in before our next break. I saw this one yesterday, and then I had Kate Sherrill send it to me again for emphasis. This is just sort of worth noting, I guess we'll say. A press release put out by a group of, are they current or former missile launch officers, like nuclear missile launching officers, as it says here, missileers, warning about the danger of Donald Trump, his impetuousness, his belligerence, etc., and of course the fact that he is solely in command of our nuclear arsenal, and that should be worrying. And I know a lot of you have spent a lot of time thinking about it and worrying about it, but I thought perhaps I might share with you some bits from this press release. Veteran nuclear launch officers to Congress rein in Trump's ability to launch nuclear first strike. Former missileers warn no individual, especially Donald Trump, should hold the absolute power to destroy nations. And probably a good reason to bring this up now, obviously, that Donald Trump is president. But yeah, it's probably a control that should be over everybody. In a new open letter to members of Congress, 17 former nuclear launch officers issue a grave warning regarding President Trump's unfettered access to nuclear weapons, declaring that the current U.S. nuclear launch process poses a clear and present danger to the country and the world. No one, not the Secretary of Defense, not the Attorney General, not Congress, can veto that order. There are no reliable safeguards in place to contain this power. Problematic, to be sure. The letter comes on the heels of last week's alarming tweets from President Trump in which he boasted about having a much bigger and more powerful nuclear button on his desk than North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The letter is, of course, included here. They argue that there are currently a number of good proposals before Congress right now that would rein in the president's power to order the first use of nuclear weapons. Whether it's assigning the defense secretary and attorney general a role in certifying a launch order, requiring a congressional declaration of war before the first use of nuclear weapons, or ending the policy of nuclear first use entirely, that won't rein him in. Any of these common sense measures would reduce the risks we now face. We cannot stand idly by as Donald Trump holds us all hostage to his petulant mood swings. That's Dr. Bruce Blair, a veteran nuclear launch officer and co-founder of the Global Zero movement to eliminate nuclear weapons. We'll be back with more on this and other topics after this. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a short break at the top of the hour. I should take a 15-minute break at the top of the hour to really get my head around what we want to do with the second half. Here's what's happening this morning. I was about to go and look up Donald Trump's tweets about canceling his trip to London, to England, which were semi-humorous this morning. But, of course, as soon as I opened up the page here trying to find the Donald Trump tweets, I've run into, let's see, Jen Hayden, Scout Finch tweeting, Trump is shocked his comments were leaked somehow. This is how white supremacy operates. He's been getting away with boardroom comments like this his entire life. This is normal to him. And of course, here we could switch over to the missing tapes or the suppressed outtakes of The Apprentice, which we are told contain, just infinite examples of just such bigotry and racism. Edited out, of course, because they would have been inappropriate for air, but I'm assured that they exist. And Trump allies doing their best to sit on those things. I assume that you would face a pretty massive lawsuit and lots of legal liability if you leaked them, but I bet we could raise that money in a GoFundMe pretty damn quick. Although that would just cause the plaintiffs to raise the stakes, and we'd have to just cough up that much more money. And what do they care? I don't know if is it Mark Burnett? I don't know if he really, truly, I don't know if he controls this stuff or not. But if he does, I'm not certain that he's really so honestly interested in hiding those comments from people to protect Donald Trump as he is interested in saying, well, I guess I'll just say that, and if nobody does it, fine. I mean, I like Donald Trump. I can protect him to that extent. But if somebody does leak the stuff, it's a huge payday for me. So, I don't want that to be the result. Let's see. Also, just thought I might share the comment here in my "In Case You Missed It" column, which now eats up the entirety of my Twitter feed. But our Twitter pal, Der Wouter Vanderhorst, who is also constantly digging into Donald Trump's horrific background, reminding us that Donald Trump gladly staffs Mar-a-Lago with Haitian temporary workers, a.k.a. those from S-hole countries, of course. And that should surprise no one. to be sure. But what was I looking for? Oh, yes, Donald Trump's tweets about canceling his trip to England, which was just, again, more of the same childish nonsense here. Reason I canceled my trip to London, he says, is that I'm not a big fan of the Obama administration, having sold perhaps the best located and finest embassy in London, that would be ours, for peanuts, only to build a new one in an off location for $1.2 billion. Bad deal. Wanted me to cut ribbon. No. I don't know whether they really do ribbon cuttings at new embassies. If they don't, Donald Trump would, of course, insist on doing one if he were there. He just loves cutting ribbons. It's just his thing. That's a real estate guy thing to do. I doubt very much whether they were going to do a ribbon cutting. I know for sure that that wasn't the reason that he canceled his trip to London. We haven't been talking much about it, but isn't he like banned from England even? Or that was, I'm sure they could get around that ban and all. But I mean, it's a huge issue. He would face enormous protests. And of course, I think the reason he canceled his trip to London was he got word that, no, you're not going to be allowed to ride in that golden carriage with the Queen. And that probably upset him more than anything. But yeah, there's lots of people talking about the facts surrounding the embassy issue. I don't find that one quite as troubling as some of the other stuff. But in case you were interested in discussing that over the weekend, no, it wasn't the Obama administration that changed, that planned for the new embassy in London. It was the Bush administration. I don't know whether there's really any ribbon cuttings. That's beside the point. But once again, trying to blame Obama for something that was done by somebody else. And I guess that's worth noting. So, by the way, I also have a tweet here from Sarah Boxer. Sarah Boxer, politics and breaking news journalist and producer with Yahoo News. So there you go. I guess they have their own. We have a breaking news section. Really? That's okay. That's just how news is delivered, but fine. She says, cannot make this up, but I bet we could have made this up. Woody Johnson, U.S. ambassador to the UK, has a brand new Evening Standard op-ed praising the new embassy in London, because, of course, that's what U.S. ambassadors do about new embassies in the countries in which they're serving. They say, this is a great new embassy. Our Nine Elms embassy is the most advanced we've ever built, he writes, and published here in the Evening Standard in the UK. But that all no longer operative. Sorry, the president has pulled the rug out from underneath you because I don't get to ride in the golden carriage. I'm not going to cut any ribbons. Well done. Just good work on that one. All right, let's see. Anything else we need to round up? Well, apparently, here's Jake Tapper's tweet about President Trump denying the remarks that he made yesterday. Why is he bothering? I don't know. No, there's no telling. Donald Trump is crazy. And I thought he was just going to stand pat with this stuff today, but I guess not. Let's see. What else can we look at here? That there's many more things that I need to bring to your attention. Oh, yes, there was some more comments on, believe it or not, this is welcome back to the desk show here on Netroots Radio. There's more about the Resolute desk out there, and let's see. We can share some more. Let's see. Oh, yes, Marianne saying, Marianne I am, who tweets as the read thread and thumb. The read and thumb. No, not the read. The thread and thumb. Resolute desk story. That's recycling at its best. I think that's a good observation. That's true. Michael Musson did some more research in Wikipedia, and he says that they tell us the British government ordered at least 3 desks to be made from the timbers of the ship. A large partner's desk was presented to U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1880 as a gesture of thanks for the rescue and return of Resolute. Fat lot of good rescuing and returning the Resolute did. They turned it into a bunch of desks, but I don't know. Maybe the rest of the ship was still sailing around. Rescue and return of the Resolute. We say this as if we know all about how the Resolute was rescued and returned, but I assume that's explained in Wikipedia. But again, if we look into it at this point, we're just turning it into Antiques Roadshow at this point. So maybe we move on. No, I can't, because Patrick Snyder has something to add here. And you're right, I think about this, Patrick, so that's why I'm going to read it. The Resolute Desk was a major plot element in the 2007, I'm glad we have the year for that one, Nicolas Cage movie, a classic of cable television, National Treasure, Book of Secrets. I've seen it. My wife likes it. Anytime it's on, I get stuck watching it. There's a couple movies like that, and that's one of them. I do not appreciate that movie as much as she does, but okay, it was fun. The Resolute Desk is in there, and I think you're right here. He says, I suspect this accounts for that bit of presidential history gaining popular currency more than the actual history itself. No doubt about that, because I couldn't have told you anything about, well, I couldn't even tell you where the damn desk came from, much less the actual history of it or where the name came from. But yeah, I think the movie probably really did do a lot to boost its profile. We're a very dumb country, I'm sorry to say. Let's see. Oh, more from Brian here, Canadian pundit. Says, okay, fine, but when I say S-hole countries, it sounds like A-hole countries, which I believe is correct. We mentioned that up at the top. What will the Girl Guides of Troop 364 think of that? I don't know. If they're listening, I can only explain myself once, or in this case, twice. All right, what else have we got to share? I got to go back to Pocket here. There's a million things that haven't made their way to the surface. Yes, let's see. Oh, yes. We might as well note, just for the record, Trump is a complete moron. I think we've been over this, but here's what I mean now. I just grabbed this Politico article, mostly for its headline, and just as a reminder, Trump declared an opioids emergency. Does everybody remember that? Then nothing changed. I know you know that, but I think we should note that for the record. The subheader here, by the way, says, states want more than thoughts and prayers. That's very clever. Our writer here is Brianna Ehley, E-H-L-E-Y. States want more than thoughts and prayers as the White House declaration is set to expire this month. That's what this particular thing is all about. It is illustrated by President Donald Trump doing a presidential type motion. He is shaking somebody's hands, no telling whether he has any idea whose hands he's shaking, and patting that person on the shoulders / shoving them aside so that he can make his way out of the building back to his television set, wherever he is here. But here's the update. President Donald Trump in October promised to liberate Americans from the, quote, scourge of affliction. And it is a scourge. I'll agree with him there. Officially declaring a 90-day public health emergency that would urgently mobilize the federal government to tackle the opioid epidemic. That declaration runs out January 23rd. Got some time here, but it's coming up fast. And beyond drawing more attention to the crisis, virtually nothing of consequence has been done, just as you expected. Trump has not formally proposed any new resources or spending, typically the starting point for any emergency response. Now, this is what I love about his declaration. He promised to roll out a, quote, really tough, really big, really great advertising campaign to spread awareness about addiction. I love it. I don't remember exactly listening or paying attention to this declaration, but you can just imagine it in your head of him saying, it's going to be great. Just like the healthcare thing. He was going to, 1/6 of the economy, everybody was concerned about a huge top of the polling issues, right? I don't know what we're going to do, but it's going to be great. I promise you, believe me, I'm going to repeal Obamacare, which has been a total disaster. And I'm going to do something really, really great. Okay? Believe me. And then, of course, nothing happened. Same thing with the opioids. I'm going to have a really tough, really big, really great advertising campaign. That's just for starters, of course. But no advertising campaign. None. Zero. Nothing's happened. That has yet to take shape, as they say. And they could, do Facebook ads in the next week or something, or rush something onto the air to try and fill in the gaps here, but they're not going to make it, and it's not going to be good, and never was. Key public health and drug posts in the administration also remain vacant, like we were just saying. So it's not clear who has the authority to get new programs moving. We do know about this, though. Kellyanne Conway was supposed to take that on in her portfolio, right? What has she done lately? Nothing. She was in hiding for the longest time over, I don't really even remember what, but people were pointing out she hadn't been on TV. Then she came roaring out the other day to go on television and fight with Chris Cuomo and start criticizing Hillary Clinton in order to whatever controversy he had brought up with her. And then, of course, it was pointed out to her, yeah, you always do the what about thing and point to Hillary Clinton. When are you guys going to get over your obsession with Hillary Clinton? And her answer was actually, we don't talk about Hillary Clinton. Nobody here in the White House, we never think about Hillary Clinton. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. You're totally ridiculous. You're accusing us of being obsessed with Hillary Clinton. I don't even care. I don't care. I've never mentioned Hillary Clinton once. You just did it. I mean, not just right there, but like a minute ago, you started to blame things on Hillary Clinton. No, I didn't. This is where we are. This is where we are. A senior White House official disputed the assessment of inaction on opioids, Politico continues to tell us, saying the emergency declaration has allowed the president to use his bully pulpit, and again, they do not know what that means, to draw further attention to this emergency that he inherited. In other words, it's everybody else's fault again. The official added that the declaration has enabled federal agencies to really change their focus and prioritize the crisis, and that getting an effective media campaign underway takes time. So then don't say you're going to do it in 90 days. That would be an idea. The president's emergency declaration can be extended, and it will be, and that's why it's ultimately not a very big deal. He never was going to do anything, but he can extend it, and he can get another moment out of it. And by the way, everyone who declared him a racist yesterday will say, being presidential, he's extending the emergency. And, of course, it should be an excuse to say, no, he's not being presidential. He's just BSing his way through this. So, okay, he'll probably extend the timeline. What else might he do? Oh, and it's up to the Health and Human Services Secretary, or currently the acting secretary, because there's no HHS secretary either, apropos of our earlier note that there are positions unfilled all over the government. So, that's the gist of that story. I won't go through the rest of it, but basically, everybody that he has called into service on this has done nothing. Kellyanne Conway, nothing. He at one point put Chris Christie in charge of this. Chris Christie, of course, getting ready to transition out of office, and he's not got any interest in doing anything for Donald Trump at this point either. And the new HHS Secretary designee, Alex Azar, isn't in office. And, of course, once he is, he will have no interest in doing anything about this either. But just be aware of that, Mr. and Mrs. Rural America. It's time for another round of newspaper stories about Trump voters still sticking with Trump. And by the way, we might as well note that most of those people live in S-hole towns. Well, can we say that now? Can we finally put that there? And out here in the S-hole of America, they're still convinced Donald Trump is their guy, but they're all addicted to opioids. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. Oh, yes, here is another update in terms of correction of our misstatements or other questions posed on the show in my uncertainty about what I'm blurting out at any given time. Dem Sign tweets on Twitter, because that's the only place you can tweet, to us here. The source, do you remember the other day that I noted, that supposed Chinese proverb / curse, may you live in interesting times? And I said, probably not even Chinese, and I'm somehow unfairly tarring the Chinese with this nonsense. He says that the source of this is actually, in fact, not Chinese, although maybe he had been to China visiting. I don't know. Joseph Chamberlain, father of the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. This according to Wikipedia, which of course means it's absolutely true. They don't miss the mark on things like this by that much all the time, all that often. But, we do live in interesting times, and as I commented back, what an interesting time to find this out. I don't know. Does it say anything? I'm curious now in the Wikipedia article. Does it say anything about Chinese? Yes, it does. By the way, it redirects to this entry from the Chinese curse. Apparently, for Chinese language profanity, you should see the other article for disambiguation purposes, Mandarin Chinese profanity, in case you want to know more about that. May you live in interesting times is an English expression, not Chinese, purported to be a translation of a traditional Chinese curse. While seemingly a blessing, the expression is always normally used ironically, with the clear implication that interesting times of peace and tranquility are more life-enhancing than interesting ones. Aha. So glad that they've explained this. How did it get to be purported to be a Chinese curse? Let's see. Despite being so common in English as to be known as the Chinese curse, the saying is apocryphal and no actual Chinese source has ever been produced. The most likely connection to Chinese culture may be deduced from analysis of the late 19th century speeches of Joseph Chamberlain, probably erroneously transmitted and revised through his son Austin Chamberlain, the dumb Chamberlain. Austin Fredo Chamberlain. I don't know. Maybe he's the smart one for staying out of politics. Maybe he didn't stay out of politics. I don't know what Austin did. Let's see. Despite widely being attributed as a Chinese curse, there's no known equivalent expression in Chinese. The nearest related Chinese expression is, there it is. It's in Chinese, which I don't read. There's a transliteration here. Forget it. Forget it. What? I don't know how you would say this. Anyway, apparently the translation is better, or usually translated as better to be a dog in a peaceful time than a human in a chaotic or warring period. That does not roll as trippingly off the tongue, to be sure. Okay, so the background is there. You can choose to take up more of it if you wish, let's say on your own time. Moving on to some other fun and interesting things that you should know for the weekend. Let's see. Oh, here's something that I kind of wanted to take note of. Bill, our Bill, yes, in Portland, Maine, tweeted the other day, and I just wanted to pick up on it here. Massive gold star, he says, to Maine Secretary of State Matt Dunlap. He kicked Trump's ass, which is terrific and huge, by the way. Honestly, if you're just like picking your foot up to shine your shoes in close proximity to the president, there's like a 60% chance you might actually kick him in the ass. It just occupies that much space. That's just true. I'm not saying anything bad. This political correctness, we got to get rid of it. I was on Trump's voter fraud commission, writes Dunlap, and its demise was inevitable. That sounds intriguing. When you say inevitable, what do you mean? Oh, there's a whole article explaining it? Great. That's what we do on this show. Let's take a look. I was on Trump's voter fraud commission, and its demise was inevitable. They won't be able to do this in the dark anymore, writes Maine's Secretary of State. Here in the, I have it from the Press Herald, the Portland Press Herald. That would be the paper in which Bill read it. But apparently it was originally published in the Washington Post, so that makes it boring again. All right, let's take a look. It didn't surprise me when I got an email from the White House on Wednesday night that President Trump had moved to dissolve the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. That's what they called this thing. The move came without warning, but given how incredibly dysfunctional the process had been from the start, the dissolution was inevitable. 12 days earlier, U.S. District Court Judge Colleen Kolar-Kotelly ruled that as a member of the commission, I am entitled to share in the work of the commission and to know when and where we were meeting, what communications we were having, and what the commission was working on. Remember, they were hiding all of this from the Democratic, quote-unquote, members of the commission. I'm not certain why they obviously felt they needed political cover. We got to include Democrats or it will be immediately recognized as illegitimate. It was illegitimate, but they hoped that having Democrats on it would disguise that. By the way, Colleen Kolar-Kotelly's name I recognize. I think Empty Wheel brings her name up all the time. She must have been working on some of the important cases here in D.C. that she covered. So I don't know whether that goes back to Scooter Libby stuff or whether that's surveillance stuff or claims of Dick Cheney claims to be a fourth branch of government separate from the others. I'm not sure what the context was, but those of you who are longtime readers of Empty Wheels probably would say, oh yeah, I know her. And you'd know why, too. The demise of the commission was inevitable simply because the voter fraud vampire hunters on the panel and in the White House prioritized a desired result of the commission's work above any sense of process. By the way, I skipped the concluding sentence of the previous paragraph, which was that shockingly obvious conclusion, that is, that they're entitled to a share in the work and what they're doing and the communications. That shockingly obvious conclusion came only after I filed a lawsuit to get answers to those very basic questions. That, of course, because the vampire hunters have no understanding of legal process and no care about it either. It didn't matter that evidence of actual voter misconduct is incredibly rare anywhere in the United States. We've all heard the ghost stories, and the Trump administration's solution was to find those ghosts and exorcise them. But that's not how the Trump administration spun the commission's work. I, for one, took Vice President Mike Pence at his word. That's how you sue your way into killing this commission, I guess. When he said at our initial meeting in Washington on July 19th that the commission would go forward without preconceived notions or preordained results. But statements made by Vice Chairman Chris Kobach, a Republican who is the Kansas Secretary of State, and the president have made it clear that not everyone shared that laudable philosophy. After dissolving the commission, the president said on Twitter that we need strong voter identification laws to fight rampant voter fraud. And Kobach explained that Trump's directive to shift the work to the Department of Homeland Security represents a tactical shift by the president, who remains very committed to finding the scope of voter fraud. I found it at zero. No preordained results, no preconceived notions, indeed. Before the commission's meeting in New Hampshire on September 12th, Kobach published an editorial in Breitbart News, that famous arbiter of fairness, explicating proof, he said, of voter fraud in that state, New Hampshire, based on the premise that 5,526 people, mostly college students who had registered to vote and who voted on Election Day in 2016, still had not obtained New Hampshire driver's licenses 10 months later. There. Obvious voter fraud. Well, not so fast. Under New Hampshire's law, students enjoy a special carve-out. They could use their out-of-state credentials to register and vote, thereby declaring domicile without establishing legal permanent residency, which would otherwise carry obligations such as converting driver's licenses. In other words, U.S. citizens living in New Hampshire can exercise their right to vote without being slandered with the charge of voter fraud. But never mind that, right? After Kobach made his claims, it was obvious to me that he and I may have been using the word fraud in very different ways. I would define fraud as voter misconduct. But in indicting New Hampshire law, which he clearly regarded as illegitimate, Kobach twisted the word to further his political agenda. Surprise. Which has historically meant making it harder for minorities, students, the poor, and anyone else possibly sympathetic towards Democrats to vote. Now, he says, anyone on the left needs to realize that by throwing the food in the air, they just lost a seat at the table. I find that striking because all I wanted to do was participate in the process and try to answer the president's question of whether there really is something wrong with American elections. It may be that the president knows full well that there's no evidence to back up his claim that he would have won the popular vote if 5 million illegal votes hadn't been cast, and that scuttling the commission will save his administration the embarrassment of facing those facts. The dissolution of the commission does not void the force of the district court ruling, and I am still committed to obtaining the documents generated by the commission. In the American system of self-governance, the people have a right to know what their government is working on. The president's action shows that he never took the process seriously, and when it wasn't going his way, he pulled the plug. The directive to move the commission's work to the Department of Homeland Security is another hide-the-ball trick designed to find a different way to get the results that he and Kobach sought. He says seek, but sought, really. And I guess they still seek them. But if I've learned anything in the process, he concludes, based on the intense and passionate input from the American people, it's that they won't be able to do this in the dark anymore. And that's the upshot of the lawsuit. Thanks very much for being there, being on hand, playing along as it were, as you needed to do in order to give yourself standing to sue, because God help us, had anybody else sued and asked this question, it would have been dismissed on standing grounds. So for those of you, if any, out there who questioned why a Democrat would even agree to participate at the outset on such a commission, I guess that's your answer. Somebody has to have standing to sue so that the rest of us can find out what the hell was going on in all this nonsense. We'll be right back with one more break with the conclusion of today's show. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We were a little bit late in getting the mute button to flip off again here. Yes, a good reminder to myself, though, that it's time to get that replacement microphone ordered. Thanks very much, everybody. Once again, the new headphones, working out very nicely. So I appreciate your support that keeps us in working equipment here. And let's see, that gives us an opportunity to swing into the final segment of the show. Hard to know exactly which of the 10,000 things I want to share with you I should, in fact, share with you. Let's just follow up with this one for starters. Grabbed a tweet here from Reuters DC national security correspondent Jonathan Landay, who tweets that CNN is reporting that the president took a victory lap last night after his S-hole country's comment. President Trump spent his Thursday night phoning aides, allies, and friends, asking them how they thought the remark was playing out in the press. One White House official referred to this as a victory lap. I wonder whether he got the feedback he was looking for or something he was not expecting. I suppose the CNN article would tell us some of that, but I'll refer you instead to the tweet, and we can all take a look at it after this show is over. Let me just keep flipping through my tabs here and see if there's anything else that I have opened and not yet been able to share with you. That is super important. I think I'm up to date in terms of open tabs on this stuff. All right, that gives me a chance to switch gears entirely and share a story. Now, here's a weird one. Out of our usual wheelhouse, but now, did I put this story away somewhere or not? There was one or two stories that I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to open a second time. There are a few publications out there that I will sometimes use that will let you see an article once and then not a second time. Among them, I guess, would be this story here. Dang. And it's too bad. But here's the story. This was a weird one. I thought I would bring it up on Friday. Seems like a Friday story. In Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, here's the headline of the story. Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry, what are you doing? Jerry Seinfeld and family they're visiting Israel. And that's enough to upset some people. The fact that he's there, the fact that he's performing, also upsetting. But for the rest of you who aren't yet upset about that, I suppose we could we could bring up this one. Jerry Seinfeld and his family visit anti-terror fantasy camp in the West Bank. Did you know there were such things? According to a Facebook post by the Caliber 3 Academy, the Seinfeld family spent the day in shooting and Krav Maga training. Very interesting for a number of reasons, not the least of which the existence of these fantasy camps, which, because they're being cast here as anti-terror fantasy camps, it takes on a very weird flavor and upsetting to some, I am sure, because, of course, those who are strong advocates, let's say, for the Palestinian position probably know, and they're probably correct offhand, that, well, what do you mean anti-terror? Of course, one person's terror being another person's freedom fighter. There's that issue. But, of course, what you're really talking about here is having a fantasy camp of shooting Palestinians, or at the very least shooting Muslims, because anti-terror certainly in the mind of defense industry minded Israelis, it's not going to be defined any other way. They're not taking on Red Brigade's terrorists, let's say, I am sure, in all of this. And it seems like a really weird thing, especially as a tourist destination. But then, of course, it's really not that different from so many tourist destinations here in the United States. And maybe that's obvious to people. Maybe it's a bad thing. Maybe it helps explain it. Maybe it puts it in some context. The idea of an anti-terror fantasy camp where you would go and pay money to bring your tourist family to a place in the West Bank under Israeli control and shoot targets and learn how to disarm Palestinians who you think of as terrorists is fairly troubling all by itself. Although, I mean, there's a million different kinds of fantasy camps out there, and military ones, that's a pretty significant fantasy, and I think you're going to find a lot of people willing to pay for that one. Baseball, military, musicians, fantasy camp, there's a lot of money to be made in selling fantasies. But this kind of shooting and hand-to-hand fighting training, like giving you the Israeli IDF experience kind of thing. There's a mythos about the Israeli Defense Forces that supporters of the IDF or the State of Israel in general obviously share among one another. And then, of course, wannabe folks who just think, well, they're badass in killing people that I hate, so that's a good thing and I should go and train with that. But we have plenty of that here in the United States. It's very interesting, though, that it would be a tourist destination. But then again, as I said, we've got similar things in many respects here in the United States. I mean, we've already heard the story a number of times here on the show of the places you can go and learn to shoot a machine gun. I want to shoot an Uzi. You can do that out in the desert west here in the United States. Of course, it's not sold as anti-terror fantasy camp, but that's basically what it is. I want to shoot an Uzi. I want to be a badass IDF killer. Okay, you can have that opportunity. Of course, we also have anti-terror. We don't call it fantasy camp here. Here we call it reality camp. Oh, you can either do it by joining the militia and playing anti-terror operative out in the woods on your own, or you can go to one of the several gun combat training academies. If it's not enough for you to learn how to properly clean, that is unload and clean your handgun and shoot it properly and learn all the protocols and all the safety rules and stuff at a regular old range, you can instead take gunfighting courses or street self-defense courses, some of which probably are wiser to take than others. Others are just wannabe, essentially, anti-terror fantasy camps right here in the United States. So, on the one hand, there's this. On the other hand, we have our own versions of this. So I don't know that it's uniquely Israeli. And I don't know that, most people would even draw that thick of a line dividing the Israeli right from the American right. But there's also another weird layer to the story, in which I say, okay, I can be kind of sympathetic to the idea, like not so much in the Israeli-Palestinian context, because that's fraught with a lot more peril and is a much more real and ugly conflict. And it's not my conflict, and it's not one I am steeped in here. I'm more steeped in the American experience. And I don't think that there's, or I should say, there's something that I think makes a good deal of sense in training, I guess, the American Jewish population in theories of this kind of self-defense, given that there are people training in the woods of America right now with the idea that they'll come roaring out of the forests and machine gun American Jews wherever they can find them. It might not be a bad idea to train in some way, not necessarily for preparation for civil war, because I think we're sunk at that point, but for the more likely day-to-day type confrontations with idiot racists who think they might want to jump the gun in the civil war they fantasize about by merely beating up people that they suspect of being Jewish or Muslim or gay or what have you. whatever excuse they want to use to have a physical fight with somebody. And it wouldn't be a bad thing if they got some comeuppance, if people were trained in self-defense techniques and could put them in their place temporarily, although honestly it's probably better in the long run, if not morally better in the long run, then pragmatically better in the long run. I don't advocate it. I don't want you to go out and do it, but it would probably all be better off if those people were dead at the end of that confrontation rather than left to stew in their own juices and become even more embittered. So, or maybe it's better to turn the other cheek then and let them play out their fantasies and never become so embittered that it rises to the level where they actually execute some of their fiendish fantasy plans. But it's it gave me some mixed feelings, which made for an interesting Friday article. The idea that, people should be trained in their own self-defense, but it doesn't necessarily, it's still distasteful that it be done at the expense of, the paper targets we're going to shoot at are identifiably Palestinian, or maybe they're not, but everybody knows that at a place in the West Bank, everybody knows what you're supposed to be imagining those targets are. It's just a weird story, but I thought it had some weird parallels. And I imagined, for instance, here's the headline of Jerry Seinfeld and family go to Israel and they visit an anti-terror fantasy camp. And because it's anti-terror, it's defined as anti-terror. We know it's anti-terror. How do we know it's anti-terror? Because it says so, even though, like we said at the outset, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter in many cases. And this one would be one of them. Imagine not being an American Jewish family and traveling to a anti-terror fantasy camp in the Middle East, but rather imagine being a Muslim American family that travels to the Middle East and goes to its own sort of anti-terror fantasy camp. And by the way, just supposing it is an actual an anti-terror camp, fantasy camp that would be recognized even by Israelis and redneck American ultra-rightists as anti-terror. Imagine the fear and panic that ensues if the neighbors of the Muslim guy find out that he went to some sort of armed camp in the Middle East to train on self-defense and guns and weaponry. That would immediately, of course, be redefined as a terror fantasy camp, not an anti-terror fantasy camp. Well, you probably think that Americans are terrorists, and that's why you give us that stupid line about one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. Well, that's obvious nonsense. Unless, of course, it's a Jewish American pro-Israel person being questioned about what he was traveling to do in the West Bank while he was away. But, of course, that would never happen. In other words, you'd never be stopped at the border coming back from Israel, even if you said, yeah, I went to learn to fight and shoot and kill people. Oh, in what context? Oh, anti-terror fantasy camp. Yeah, okay, come on in. Now you, Mr. Muslim guy, where were you? Well, I was, you know what? I was in the same place. I was also in the West Bank. I was also at an anti-terror fantasy camp. I learned to shoot a gun and fight and kill people too. Oh, you did? Were your instructors Israeli? No. You're under arrest and you're going to Guantanamo. That's the upshot of that. You all know that that would happen. You would never get through the airport if it was found out that you had gone to a Middle Eastern country as a Muslim and trained with other Muslims just to defend yourselves. Right? But no, that would obviously be seen as, oh my God, did you know there were Al-Qaeda fantasy camps out there? Well, they're not fantasy camps. They're training camps, for one thing. But if there were fantasy camps about it, why can't they have this fantasy, right? I'm not advocating terrorism. I'm talking about self-defense. Muslims are under attack everywhere. In the United States in particular, it's a dangerous place. Now, I think you could just as easily go out into the woods and train that way. But you'd have to train. It would have to be Muslims teaching other Muslims about peaceful self-defense. But you know what? Even that wouldn't work. That would immediately be called out as suspicious. 10 Muslims just went out in the woods with machine guns, and they're firing like crazy at a bunch of trees. Oh, my God, it's a terror sleeper cell. Are you sure? Because down the road, there are 10 American idiots. And by the way, they all have the same beards, in case you were not looking closely enough. But these guys have, I don't know, more camouflage on, or they have Punisher masks. So they're the patriots, by the way. These other guys over here, yes, they're Muslim, but they're not covering their faces. They're open about who they are. They legally own the guns. They're exercising their constitutional rights. They're talking about self-defense. All the things that the other guys say, but for some reason they cover their faces and wear Punisher masks and fantasize, therefore, about killing people in extrajudicial mercenary revenge vigilante killings. Oh, they're the peaceful ones. It's the other guys who are the terrorists. You know that would come out that way. Anyway, I just thought that whole genre of fantasy camp was interesting, let's say, to talk about, and would be worthwhile discussion for at least part of a Friday. I bet you didn't even know that there were such a thing. There were such things in Israel or anywhere else, but try opening one of those in the United States for somebody from the wrong religion, and you'll find yourself on trial for terrorism. But it's an anti-terror fantasy camp. Doesn't matter. And of course, your fantasy camps that exist in the woods right now are in fact terrorist fantasy camps. And by the way, people who have gone to them have since been arrested on terrorism charges, domestic terrorism. Make no mistake about that. Some of them get away with not somehow coming down under terrorism laws, but are charged with gun violations or weapons violations of various stripes. But nobody wants to hang the terrorism charge on it. But there are people who do, in fact, get charged with terrorism. And they do train in these places. And somehow those places get to, by the way, stay in business and say, no, we're all about anti-terrorism. Okay, well, we'll just focus on this one guy then. But you know that a Muslim one would be shut down in an instant. I think I've made the point, and it's probably time to move on from there to some other topics that might be of use to you for the weekend. Let's see. Some questions and comments that have come in over the past few minutes. The Warlock asking the question, why is Seinfeld going there? I don't know. I can't even attempt to explain it. I think... Why Israel? I think he had a show to do there. I don't know that was the reason he visited Israel. He may just have made a tourist trip to Israel and said, I'll pay for it by doing a show while I'm over there. Or, I don't know how he lives his life. Why did he go to the camp? I don't know. Fantasy. He wanted to shoot guns and learn Krav Maga. People are into military stuff. And so we went. Why did I take my kids to drive an armored personnel carrier and crush a car? I don't know. I thought they would think it was fun. Some people think that shooting cool IDF guns is interesting or fun or whatever. But so why did he go there? I don't know. Is it problematic? You bet. Is he in a position to be boycotted for it? I don't know. I don't know if that's going to affect him. I don't usually dabble in that sort of thing. But I guess you could question him about it. Did I see the diary? He asked me about the Muslims report stuff. I didn't, although I'd love to. You want to send me a link to it, I would take a look. I imagine just from the, that raises a lot of thoughts in my mind. I'm not certain what it's about, but one of the themes that we hit on the show and on my Twitter feed every once in a while, very frequently, really. Every time a white person pulls an act of terrorism, some very intelligent Muslim tweeters that I like to follow here in the United States, always reminding us, aren't we supposed to be wondering where he was radicalized and ask where the parents are and how come white people didn't step up and report his suspicious activity? Is that what it was about? I'm guessing. Wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. By the way, yes, good comment also from the Warlock during our previous segment about the voting commission, the voter fraud commission. Yes, the election of this occurred to me too as I was reading it, but I moved on thank you for noticing here. The election of Trump is itself prima facie evidence of a problem in voting. That's probably true. And our good friend Chief Beef Loco with a comment or two. There's usually several during the show, but they require a bit more thought, I think, than I'm able to give them during the show. But this one I can see is about the Chinese proverb issue. And this looks like an interesting thing here today. He was saying, and there's a couple of them here, that he learned from his Japanese in-laws. Very interesting. That instead of saying pot calling the kettle black, our idiom here, they have one that translates, I guess, as that's the booger pointing at the earwax. That's terrific. Bill, I bet you'll want to use that one at some point. Yeah, well, right, that's the booger pointing at the earwax. No, seriously, Japanese people say that. And it really means something. I like that. That's interesting. I don't know. Maybe you're making it up. I wouldn't be able to call you out on that. Now, that's a scam. Don't take advantage of me. There's another one, a Polish saying, interestingly enough, that says, they wish roasted pigeons will fly into their mouths, which defines to a T these current banana Republicans, interestingly enough. That I get that one. That's got a little bit of almost the Yiddish feel to it there, and no surprise, of course, because Yiddish language being rooted in Eastern European cultures, it makes sense, right? They wish you should wish that roasted pigeons will fly into your mouths, like without lifting a finger. You suddenly get a good meal out of this. This is among people who think roasted pigeons make a good meal, by the way. I don't count myself there, but call it squab, and all bets are off. You see what's going on there. Let's see. There's more, though, that he's shared with us here. My favorite Chinese saying today, he says, is draw snake, add legs. That is going to require some interpretation for us, which means, he says, don't overthink or over-deliver. It's a great one when you've got tasks on your plate that seem insurmountable or you're engineering or planning something. I think I can pull some good meaning out of that one. Draw a snake. Oh, wait a minute. This is interesting. It says he retweeted it a few minutes later. I guess typo came through here. So instead of draw a snake, add legs, it's draw a snake, but don't add legs. That seems entirely different, meaning don't overthink it. I figured maybe the previous iteration of it was, well, if you want a snake to walk, just draw it with some legs, and then there, now it's not a problem. But it actually works out in reverse. Draw a snake, but don't add legs. All right, well, I wish I had seen that one. Let's see. By the way, a comment from him on the fantasy camp things. It's weird and creepy at a minimum that those anti-whatever militancy fantasy camps, especially since it's basically an apartheid state with brick and mortar walls rather than the virtual hiring and opportunity walls we have here, it's like Philip K. Dick's We Can Remember It For You wholesale. A good comment. Thanks for making it. Yeah, the whole thing was a little bit creepy. I thought that was an interesting thing for discussion for the weekend for all of you. No matter where you're coming from, I think everybody can see the weirdness there. The Warlock has sent me the diary to which he was referring. Muslims report stuff. It's a hashtag. Lights up Twitter in response to Trump. It is it's actually a diary from some time ago. October 10th, 2016 by Expat Girl. Let's just take a quick look at the lead here. As dark and bizarre as tonight's town hall debate was, we're going back to the election here. Donald Trump's demand that Muslims need to report on their friends, neighbors, and family members gave birth to a truly glorious hashtag, Muslims report stuff. Okay. Let's see. Here's some of the reporting that came out of that one from American Muslims. I'd like to report that we don't know more about terrorism because we're Muslim and just as clueless as everyone else. Hashtag Muslims report stuff. I think my sister drank orange juice straight out of the carton. We'll continue to investigate. Hashtag Muslims report stuff. And I saw armed jihadists curse the U.S. government and swear they'd fight to the death, but it turned out they were white supremacists. Hashtag Muslims report stuff. See? I've certainly seen things quite like that we all have. But excellent point. Thanks for bringing it up and sharing it with us here as we wrap things up on the show. We are getting pretty close to the end of the show. You know, it might not be a bad idea to try and remind myself to leave enough time for summarizing today's West Coast cookbook and speakeasy. I see Justice has me prepared for that. We'll take a look at what he's got coming up for you and see, is there anything else that we need to squeeze in before closing things out for the weekend? Well, there's plenty, I'm sure, but I don't know if anything that makes a great deal of sense. I did report the other day that there was an investigation now launched into the Kushner family businesses. I think I shared the article. I want to share just a little bit of detail in case you haven't been a long-time listener. I said it was about time that the SEC began investigating Kushner's businesses over the use of the Visa program. And if you weren't a long-time listener, maybe you didn't connect those dots. The SEC is doing the investigation. Although, honestly, the Department of Homeland Security ought to join in on this one. Why? Because the visas we're talking about are a very weird class of visa that really probably ought to be eliminated outright. But I wonder what Donald Trump thinks about these visas in light of his latest comments. The SEC is probing Kushner, it reports here in The Hill, over the company's use of the EB-5 program, which provides green cards to immigrants who invest at least $500,000 in certain U.S. businesses. And guess what? Some of those certain U.S. businesses are Jared Kushner's businesses. In other words, if you give me $500,000 as venture capital to back up one of my dumb real estate deals, or even a smart real estate deal for that matter, you get a green card. That's just all it is. Give Jared Kushner, or really anybody else, but it's best if you do it with Jared Kushner because he's involved with the government and you know how bribery works, right? Wink, wink. We're not doing that. You give us $500,000, we'll get you a green card. Does that not bother Donald Trump? I'm sure that it does, but again, he's a hypocrite. This is a crap country, Haiti. Why do we have to have Haitians in this country? And he's hiring Haitians hand over fist for Mar-a-Lago. Wash the dishes when I eat dinner. He wants them done. By the way, all the service staff that the rich people see, they're white. They're Eastern European. The Haitians work elsewhere. I am certain of it. And so it probably doesn't bother him any, besides which it gives Jared money, and that means Ivanka's taken care of, and I don't have to pay for whatever doodad she's after this week. I don't know. Maybe she's a lot more high-minded than I give her credit for. But at any rate, I'm glad the SEC is in on it and taking a look at it in terms of the securities, which it really is. I'm offering you something in exchange for a so-called investment. But honestly, ICE and HHS ought to be investigating this along the way. I don't know what took so long to get this investigation started, but maybe they needed to hire people into the SEC who would guarantee that Kushner got away with it. Maybe that's all they were waiting for. Anyway, well worth noting. I don't think it goes anywhere because it's Jared Kushner, and they're going to excuse him of almost anything. All right. Well, we jammed a lot of stuff into today's show. There is, of course, more that we probably didn't get to. I know there's stuff I didn't get to. Now we'll see whether the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next year on Netroots Radio. We'll get to some of this stuff. Starting off, the Fix's Eugene Scott explains how Trump's S-hole countries comment is the latest example of his history of demeaning statements on non-white immigrants. That's true. I'm glad it'll be laid out point by point. Then, on the rest of the menu, a federal appeals court orders North Carolina, to redraw its illegally gerrymandered U.S. House districts in 2 weeks, or the court will. We'll see how they do with that one. The New York City Council members, 2 of them, violently arrested while protesting an immigration activist's deportation. And in further proof he learned American civics from the FSB, Trump accused 2 government employees of treason, real treason, he says, for criticizing him. After their break, they move on to a discussion of how Martian ice deposits could sustain human outposts in the future. How interesting is that? And the highest ideals of Locke, Hume, and Kant, first proposed
Daily Coos
by
Radio.
whom? I'll tell you after this.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
I should know our music better than that. They'll be talking about this. Get this one. The highest ideals of Locke, Hume, and Kant, white people, right, were first proposed more than a century earlier by an Ethiopian in a cave. All the best stuff happens in caves. Stay tuned to find out exactly how and why on Justice's program next.